It's time for us to take a trip to India, where peace meetings have been ongoing between India and the U.S., trying to resolve some of its trade disputes. Joining us on this conversation virtually would be Dr. Raju, who is an ex-advisor to the United Nations, ex-vice chancellor, Chancellor Emeritus, founder and director, World Development Foundation, World Energy Forum. He's also an Indian, so he's the right person to speak to us about the reconciliation move between India and US regarding some of its trade disputes, about 7 of them. So let's bring in Dr. Raju now. Good morning, Dr. Raju.
Good morning. How are you guys doing in Nigeria?
We're good in Nigeria. How are you?
Yeah, super. There is some kind of a transmission delay. I hope we can get over it.
Okay, but we can hear you clearly, and it's good now. All right, so let's kick off the conversation. India and the US moving to settle some of its trade disputes. Now, one of them happens to be the ban of poultry products from the US by India during the avian flu period, at a time where there was bird flu, and India got scared and banned products from poultry products from the US, and some other trade issues. What is actually the reason for this move to settle some of the trade disputes between the US and India?
Yes, let me begin by saying that India has been a country which follows all the international rules, regulations, and the suggestions, and also the international politics. So what happened was, this is a case where which was brought up in 2011, and after that there were intense negotiations between the US and also India. But what happens is, when there's such a huge body of negotiators are involved, they definitely have a very thorough way of discussions, and then eventually coming with all kinds of technicalities involved. And so this has taken a lot more time than what was really required. And that is what is my feeling. And then there are other disputes which were subsequent to that, and some of them are tit for tat kind of an issue. But along with the bird, the chicken issue, every other big issue also has been resolved. That's a good news. I must admit there are a lot more than what we generally see. There are a lot of hidden factors which we can discuss as we go along. Please.
All right, good to see you again, Dr. Raju. I'd like you to give us a little background to the position of India as regards the trade dispute. We're aware that a few months ago, there were certain concerns that were raised. And now what has changed now that there's a resolution? I would also like you to give details about these 7 areas where they resolved this trade dispute, and what are these sensitive decisions being taken by these 2 nations?
Yes. The single most important factor which has resolved disputes is the willingness of both the parties, that is US and India, to come to solutions to solve these problems. And it is also a kind of a challenge to the bureaucracy on both sides of the ocean, whereby they were more technically interested to bring up these 7 disputes into resolution by discussions at the WTO. But then they realized that the mechanisms set in by the multilateral agencies are good when they are all affecting many, many countries. When it is one-to-one, it is better resolved at the one-to-one level. So I think the single most and the critical point was the meeting by this sidelines of G20 by the leader of the US and the leader of India, where it was resolved to resolve this. So they agreed, then they said this has to be sorted out very soon, because aviation flu is almost non-existent, and there is no point in discussing which country has it and whether the surrounding countries also have it. These are two technical matters which were relevant at the point of raising the complaint, but then over the period they all get dissolved and disappeared. So that's what has happened to this set of disputes. And then the second thing is, India has a very, very strong poultry industry. So obviously the pressure internally for the government not to settle import of poultry products from the US has prevailed upon for time. But at the same time, people at the right levels, they have realized that there is no point in trying to put up your defenses, whereas when somebody else puts his own defense, you have no choice. So it was almost like a tit for tat situation. So once the political level, they understood this, and all the cobwebs have been cleared, and then they decided to resolve it in 2 months, and that's exactly what has happened. Even though the Indian lobby of the poultry industry is still the same, but when you are exposed to competition from not only in India but also overseas, now the whole accent is, you want to export to my country, then I'm going to export to your country. It is not that you want to export to my country, then I'm going to stop you. And the other guy says, no, if you want to export to my country, I'm going to stop. No, I'm not talking about chicken. I can export anything else. No, he said, no, you cannot do that. I don't want to import the ones which are going to hurt my local industries. So these dialogues have been going on for too long a period, and that has completely been set right, and then obstacles have been removed. My usual example is even in Nigeria, the question of having a circle in between the roads for all the vehicles will be moving around that. And if it goes as long as there's traffic smooth. But if somebody stops a vehicle or it breaks down and it becomes a kind of a block on which the entire traffic in all the four directions will stop, and somebody has to remove that obstacle. So an external party, because everything is jammed and no vehicle can go inside to pull that out and things like that. So there may be a crane that is really required. That's exactly what is happening. The meeting between President Biden and then Prime Minister Modi was that rescue mission. And they said, look, both the countries are losing because we could have increased our trade. And as they said, the tempo has improved, and nearly 7 to 8% of the mutual trade has gone up. And then people are now understanding by trading more between nations, everybody benefits. This is a basic theory of international trade theory. I'm a person from the international business, and what the first lesson is to learn why nations should trade. So they went to the fundamentals. They said you cannot be restrictive. And the second point which has really come about is, when we talk about massive organizations like WTO, of which I'm also not a direct part, but certainly I'm connected with that, is that I'm from the ITC Geneva, International Trade Center Geneva, which is the executive arm of UNCTAD WTO. So WTO is part and parcel of our DNA. I used to work for the sister organization, or a daughter organization, you must say. So there we realize it is nice to have 193 members sitting in a huge hall and discussing, this is a resolution that has to be done, and this is status, and then the Director General gives the report, and then again next meeting again the same thing comes up and it has not been resolved. So this becomes a very important point for everybody to look at and then say, look, we have to resolve it. That was a kind of a difference when we said we have to resolve it, and that's what they have resolved it. I think that is a key issue. But there are, I want to just go over the other disputes, primarily when we talked about the poultry. Then there are other issues which are on the US tariffs on steel and aluminum products from India. That was one of the disputes, which again got resolved. And this was, in my opinion, I'm not a party to the discussions, nor I'm from the Indian government activities. But I must say that from the outside, when we look at this, seems to have been one of the tit for tat program. Then the third one was it has appealed. That was the third point. US has appealed against the India's retaliatory tariffs. The fourth one was about Indian subsidies for solar cells and modules under Jain National Solar Mission. So what happens is when you mix domestic politics and then overseas politics, this really changes the entire scenario. Because of the Indian government's interest to ensure that a lot more industries, a lot more individuals start using solar cells for power generation at the local level. But unfortunately, what really happened is that is construed to be a sort of an indirect subsidy for India to export its solar cells. So this again became a point of contention. And India, what it did do is to have complained against these things again. So that became a separate dispute item. And US gave another counter-retaliatory measure of saying that India is giving a lot of export subsidies, and which they are linking up with this solar cell program, which was basically a domestic one. And then the seventh one was India's position regarding the countervailing duty on hot-rolled carbon flats produced in the US. So what happens is when you say you will put export duty, you will put import duty, that kind of disturbs the real scene, the pricing scene, and also what way the trade has to happen. So this becomes very important when you have large imports and exports, big ticket items. I think the better senses prevail to resolve disputes that have been pending for long. So what is the lesson for everybody, and particularly Nigeria and other African countries? It is a trend that you're seeing that people are shedding their multilateralism and going on a bilateralism. I don't want to name countries, but essentially they are abrogating the treaties, what they have done in the international manner, and then they say, look, we are going to do it on our own, the way we want. So in fact, even regime change has complicated the matter so much. And then the certain regimes have made agreements secretly with government players, but maybe out of compulsions to show the public that they are doing something, or eventually the international bodies find out, and then it becomes a very bad situation. For instance, the question of taking loans and things from, again, I don't want to name names, from a particular country, and then not included in the national accounts. And then it becomes a sore thumb in when you settle the IMF and World Bank dues and things like that. So this becomes out of the balance sheet item. That's exactly what has happened when they realize it is of no use to continue the disputes, and we must resolve. And that's what really happened. So the resolution will come only when there is a political will and there is a need, and then people realize the benefits of doing international trade, and then they want to continue and then ensure that it really helps. So these are the 7 disputes, including the basically it's a chicken dispute. It's a very small dispute. It's not a massive one, you know.
It's really funny how you put in Dr. Raju as chicken dispute, because most of the disputes that have been resolved center around poultry products. Now, India is U.S. ninth largest trading partner. In 2022 alone, the U.S. sold goods and services worth $73.1 billion to India. But the U.S. have had market access concerns with India, as India has imposed some restrictions in forms of tariffs. But what is it about India that makes it still an attractive market, an attractive investment destination for the U.S.?
Right. I think you touched a very vital point. I'm thanking you for that. Basically, India is the upcoming world economy, and where there is everything that can be done from the USA and from other countries which are wanting to have a slice of the pie. So India has done its marketing very well all over the globe, telling about the, what do you call, the demographic dividend, because our population is very young, and then there is so much demand is going on, and so on and so forth. So people are looking at from every country. And this also helps India in a very indirect way. When we talked about the bilateralism, one important point we must remember is that India also has a tradition of dealing bilaterally with many countries. This is part of the post-independence scenario where India was considered to be a socialistic country. So what happened was most of the countries, particularly the communist bloc, the Soviet bloc, they never had the foreign exchange, free foreign exchange like dollar and so on and so forth, but they were having goods and services which were really needed in territories. So it became a matter of convenience for India to deal bilaterally. And that tradition continues even till date, because India is one of the largest importer of petroleum products, oil from the USSR, and now the Russia. So obviously what happens is governments are using the available mechanisms in a way that it suits them, because eventually they have to keep the local politics go in a very smooth manner. And then there should not be any political hindrance for the ruling party to provide the benefits, what they promise to the public. And then the second thing is they also have to see the progress and the positioning of countries like India in the international markets. So I think it has really worked well. Basically, India has been marketed very well, and that is my feeling, and it will continue to do so. It's a very large market for any product from anywhere in the world. And it is time that we can talk about the other countries which are having a good trade with India for very many items. So they find the growing market, the easiness with which they can import, because rules are already set, and we are part of the, India is part of the many multilateral rule setting bodies. And India is considered to be a very peaceful nation, so, and also a very rule-bound nation. So when somebody is exporting something out here, they are 100% sure that they will get the money, whatever has been promised, through the confirmed letter of credit without recourse to the buyers, and all of those things which are already existing. So that kind of a mechanism makes any country to be happy with dealing with India. And that will continue to be there for a long, long time to come. Yeah.
All right. It's interesting to know that this disputes have been resolved. But I learned the U.S. is, the U.S. asked for compensation from India as a result of lateness in implementing this decision. Give us update on this. What's the position of India as regards this compensation, and what's the latest development?
I think Indian, I am not privy to those internal discussions as yet, but there could be a mechanism by which the international settlements can happen. For instance, when we talk about the carbon fund, there is a very good example available. The settlement mechanisms have to be taken care. I'm sure at the highest level, the government is working on that. Then anything that will be based on the rules and regulations of WTO will be followed, because India is one of the prominent members of the WTO, and then whatever India does will be seen by everybody, whether India itself is following or not following. So it'll follow the rules and regulations. I'm 100% sure about that. But the discussions are ongoing, and when it's like a family dispute. When husband and wife decide that the disputes can be solved, and then they come to an amicable solution. So all these small matters will be just thrown out, and if anybody is trying to create third party, fourth party, they will be butchered. That's how it is. So discussions are actively on, and in every aspect of the compensation and so on and so forth. And the highest level are working. To my mind, it is still not sorted out. So sooner or later, it will be.
It's about the largest foreign direct investment. It's about the country that brings in the largest amount of foreign direct investment into India. And so, sitting together with India to settle trade disputes, how do you think they can do more trade with each other from these resolutions that have come between India and the US? What can bolster more trade between the two countries?
Yeah, this is also a very important point. What we discussed so far is about the history and geography, but we are talking about the future. And I believe the future is very, very bright. The collaboration with India by the US will happen at all levels, because these are very large democratic countries of the world, and whatever they do certainly is the example for everybody else to follow. And there is a sizable expatriate community of Indians in the United States, and then they are all very keen on encouraging the the two-way investment promotion and so on and so forth. There are many organizations which are doing this to promote USA into India, and India into the USA. So I believe the current scenario will change for the better, and US has too many things to offer, particularly in the way in which India is doing these solar cells, and then putting up these semiconductor plants and so on and so forth, and then also buying the aircraft from the Boeing and things like that. So this will considerably increase its exports to India in all manner of speaking. And in that, investment is one vital part, because when you put money into the the projects, and then when you start, obviously there are a lot more things which can be imported from the US in terms of plant, machinery, technology, know-how, and so on and so forth. So my feeling is that investments US will increase many, many folds, and not only in software, which is the current favorite, but also in every conceivable field. And then US will find it easy for it to send money and then take back the money, because rules and regulations and the procedures are very well set in India. So ease of doing business is what is going to make a difference, and that is what India is pushing very hard for. And many visits by the Prime Minister Modi, and also the Foreign Minister, the Industry Minister, India is taking part in all the important forums, investment summits, and so on and so forth. So that keeps the tempo moving in the section in which both countries want.
All right. Now that India and the US, they've resolved these disputes, and officially they've informed the World Trade Organization of these decisions, what will be the role of WTO and your expectations from this body as regards these disputes, or this resolution of these disputes?
United Nations, of which I was associated for the past so many decades, is to give a kind of a steel frame for the world to be there as an entity. Otherwise, with all the 17 SDGs, There are no other entities which are interested in the existence and the future of the world as much as the United Nations or its own bodies like a WTO. So WTO will definitely continue to play a kind of a honest broker in all these discussions and negotiations. And but one very important fallout of the whole thing is, in my opinion, I've got no confirmation from any of these institutions, even though I take part, is that definitely WTO also will learn from why such resolutions are taking so much time in spite of its own bookkeeping and record keeping. It has to play an active role. So they may take, a number of measures which will reduce the time delays. One important thing is, by design or default, UN organizations have reduced their headcount. That is not the way it was earlier. So obviously, that is one important thing that has happened. Second thing is the induction of IT and software within the working of the UN organizations also has speedified things. If something was taking 10 years earlier, now with these two factors, things are going to take maybe 1 year to be resolved. But the third one, the impending danger is that why we require a WTO or AFCFTA if we cannot get everybody to be a member of the organization, and then if everybody is not collaborating to solve the issues, then why should we have these organizations? That thinking is going on within the hierarchies of all the multilateral organizations. And it should not be that they miss the main point. They have to take this, how to cut down delays, how to make people feel that we are the resolving bodies, not the troublemaking bodies, But the right thinking is on. So you may have to wait for some more interesting announcements from WTO and connected organizations, including AFCFTA, I'm sure.
All right, let's look at the situation between the U.S. and China. In the case of U.S. and India, they have been able to resolve all trade disputes, but we see an ongoing trade war between the U.S. and China that never ceases to end. What is the difference, and what can U.S. and China learn from how the U.S. and India resolve their trade disputes?
I think it is not fair on me to comment on China. Absolutely not correct. But still, this is a forum and we are discussing openly. And your interest is to see that how at such situations things can be settled. My own feeling is that China is a very tough negotiator. And that's one that has really brought them to this scale and size in such a short period. For instance, at the time of independence in 1947, India and China were virtually at the same level of economic, prosperity. But see, whereas China has gone into a faster spin, whereas India has been moving slowly. Of course, you may counter me by saying the race between the rabbit and also the tortoise. But that's not a good anecdote to bring up here. But fundamentally, what I'm saying is China has been negotiating very, very strongly with America. They have to sort of give in. That's my observation. I'm not even competent to advise China about that. But that is my wish, because in international theory, trade theory, what we know for sure is that everybody benefits if two nations trade. Everybody benefits in their own way, but it's a big theory which I don't want to explain. But fundamentally, that is the consideration with which China should work. China should be ready to resolve all the institutions, situations, and then enable America to export more into China, because American exports, I believe, is more into investments, into factories like Apple and Tesla and all of these things. And there are so many restrictions. But the whole thing started, the prosperity also started taking the top gear when Deng Xiaoping had really made an open China policy. So I think in the ascendance of China, the policies of USA has helped a lot. And then that is what they should also be happy about. And then they should know that if the US is happy with Chinese policies on importation and also investments, so obviously that will benefit not only China, not only the US, everybody else. Because there are so many subcontractors, vendors for China. When we call China as the workshop of the world, but it is not so. There are so many vendors which are around China, like Thailand, Vietnam, North Korea, Russia. Everybody puts their own stuff, and then actually the product emerges, and then it reaches the shores of the US. So everybody benefits. So I think time, and this should be a good example for China also to follow, that if India can benefit, why not us? Because they are very, very competitive spirited country. Certainly, I'm sure somewhere in Beijing, they're sitting and strategizing, oh, this is what has happened. What about us? I'm sure, but it is good for everybody if they solve this. Yeah.
Raju, what a way to wrap up this conversation. We feel like extending this conversation because it's been quite productive, but we just have to wrap up now. And we need to thank you for your time and your submission. This is coming from an ex-advisor to the United Nations. No doubt you are the right mind for this kind of conversation. Thank you for your time, Dr. Raju.
Thank you, brother. Thank you, sister. Take care. Bye.
Early exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.